Hi students, so today we will continue with the part on nutrition. So we'll be looking at the human digestive system. Okay, the human digestive system itself, as you can see, takes part in all the different organs. Okay, so we'll be looking at these organs. So there are two types of digestion that we'll be looking at. These two types of digestion, you will have the physical digestion and the chemical digestion. Okay, so physical digestion, take note that it is breaking up. Okay, the key word here is up, whereas for chemical digestion, which requires enzymes, it is breaking down of food by enzymes. Okay, so these are the different systems that it goes through. Okay, so you can see that it is actually one whole long chain and it's all connected to one another. So therefore, this is also otherwise known as the alimentary canal, because it forms a canal loop on its own. Okay, so at the same time, you will also have things like the accessory organs, which will help out in digestion itself, but it is not part of the alimentary canal. Okay, so let me repeat. Accessory organs, they help out in digestion since it is the digestive system, but they are not part of the alimentary canal. Okay, so what are these accessory organs? We have got the pancreas, we have got the liver, and the gallbladder itself, which forms the accessory organs to contribute in terms of enzymes and other factors which will help in digestion. Okay, so these are the parts that are of the digestive system with its own respective components. Okay, so first we have got the mouth. So the purpose of the mouth for physical digestion is to break up the food into smaller substances, into smaller molecules. So at the same time, what the mouth have is that it also have the teeth, which will help to cut and chew. It also have the tongue. So what the tongue does is that it will roll the food into a bolus. Okay, so bolus is sort of like a ball, so that it makes things easier to chew. At the same time, the mouth also secretes saliva. So the purpose of the saliva is to moisten the food. Okay, not only does it moisten the food, it also contains this particular enzyme called salivary amylase. Okay, so these are the physical digestion components of the mouth. Now, same thing about the mouth, but in terms of the chemical digestion. Okay, so in the mouth, chemical digestion is digesting carbohydrates only. So carbohydrates, as we recall, is mainly the starch which is present in the food that we eat, and this is broken down into our disaccharides. Okay, so recall back the earlier chapter on nutrition, whereby you have got large components which are called your polysaccharides, and these will be broken down into disaccharides. Okay, so at this junction in the mouth, your proteins and your fats are not digested at all. Okay, so just make a note, protein and fats, they are not digested. Okay, so moving on to the esophagus itself. So once you chew the food into the form of a bolus, it will enter into the esophagus. Okay, so in the esophagus, it moves down by its own action, which is called the peristalsis action. Okay, so peristalsis action, we will look at the next page regarding how this action works. It's a muscle contraction and relaxation, and this happens independently whether you are standing up, or if you do a headstand, or if you are on the moon, you can also swallow food. Okay, so move on to the next page first. So we will have here the peristalsis action that is going to take place. So you can see that the direction of the move is due to the presence of my contracted muscles along with relaxed muscles themselves. Okay, so the areas will be pinching and the foot direction will move down this way. Okay, at this point of time, you are not required to know how the contraction and relaxation work. In case your school goes through this, okay, a set of muscle that has both working in opposite direction. So if they are working in opposite direction, this kind of muscles, they are also known as the antagonistic muscles. Okay, so antagonistic muscles, we have got other examples such as the eye. Okay, we also have the tricep, like for example when you are trying to lift things, and your leg muscles as well when you are trying to, for example when you are sitting down and you raise your leg up. Okay, so the upper part of the muscles will contract, whereas the lower part of the muscles will relax. Okay, so they work in opposite directions to produce an effect. Alright, so coming back to here, so we have got the esophagus done. Now the next part of it is the stomach itself. Okay, so at the stomach, what happens is we will look at physical digestion first. Okay, so the same thing. What does the stomach produce to get itself ready? Okay, so it has got water. So the purpose of the water itself is to provide the environment to activate hydrochloric acid conditions. Okay, so why do I need the hydrochloric acid conditions? We will look at it later. Okay, so the stomach also contains gastric juices. Okay, so in terms of the chemical digestion, it digests my proteins into polypeptides. Okay, so once it is digested into polypeptides, what the stomach also do is that it enables churning. Okay, so churning is also part of the physical process. Churning, at the end of churning, you will get this substance which is called an acidic chyme. Okay, so acidic chyme is like a porridge consistency with all the food that is being broken up. Okay, take note, I use the word broken up into small tiny little pieces, and how it forms is due to churning. So the stomach muscle will move left and right gently through the internal contractions to enable this effect to take place. Okay. So once the stomach is ready, it will then send these substances, the acidic chyme, into the small intestines. Okay, so take note over here, your mouth have a pH of approximately 7, whereas your stomach has a pH of approximately 1 to 2, so which is extremely low. So in which case, whatever salivary amylase that is from the mouth and enters into the stomach will be deactivated. In other words, the salivary amylase that was coating the food substances in the mouth to enter into the stomach will no longer be able to be used. Now, moving on to your small intestines. Now, small intestines also have their own pH levels. So the small intestines pH range from about approximately 9 to 10 or 11. Okay, so you can see that there is a big difference between the pH from the stomach into the small intestines. So how does the stomach deal with this? Okay, so two things. Okay, now before we continue on with the small intestines, let's look at the liver itself and also the gallbladder. Okay, so because this will come in handy. So the liver itself, it produces this thing called the bile. Okay, so bile is extremely basic, so which means the pH is extremely high. So once the bile is produced, it is stored in the gallbladder. Okay, so the purpose of the gallbladder is to store the bile that is produced by the liver, and this bile actually has a greenish color to it. Okay, so once it is ready, the bile itself will enter the small intestines via this thing called the bile duct. Okay, so in biology, anything to do with a duct means it is entering somewhere. Okay, so what is the purpose of this bile is two things. Okay, so one, bile actually helps to emulsify fats. So recall earlier on when we did the food test topics and we talked about emulsification of fats using the ethanol test. So when fats are emulsified, it means that a huge fat droplet that is actually broken up. Physical process, so it is broken up into very small pieces, okay, for enzyme activity. So once the bile emulsify the fats, that will then allow the enzyme to work. Another thing that the bile does is that it will also help to neutralize the acidic chyme. Okay, so you know that the stomach has a very low pH, so the bile itself will neutralize this acidic chyme, therefore enabling the enzymes in the small intestines to function. Okay, so coming back to the small intestines itself also produces its own intestinal juice. Okay, so two things to do with this small intestinal juice. The first thing is that it will help to also neutralize the acidic chyme. Second thing is that it contains enzymes for further digestion. Alright, Now, in the small intestines here, okay, so front part of the small intestines, not only does it receive help from the liver and the gallbladder, which are the accessory organs, it also receives help from the pancreas. Okay, so what does the pancreas do? It will secrete pancreatic enzymes, which will then enter into the small intestines, which will help with digestion itself. Okay, so coming back to the table that you have in front of you, okay, the small intestines is divided into 3 sections. You do not have to know the names of the 3 sections at this point in time. What you do have to know is that the lower part of the intestine will complete the food digestion, and whatever end products will then be absorbed. Okay. Now, whatever things that are not absorbed, which means they are not required, this will then be stored in the rectum. And of course, that is after the large intestines reabsorb the water that is to be used and also the minerals from the undigested food substances. Okay, so the purpose of the anus, we all know, is to remove the feces from the body itself. Okay, so we have talked about salivary glands to produce saliva here at the part on mouth. Okay, the liver secreting bile, we have also talked about it. Now, I want you to take note of one thing: secrete, not secrets. Okay, so secrete means to produce. So in biology, whenever we talk about an organ producing something, the terminology to use is to secrete. Okay, make sure you change that, secrete. Okay, the gallbladder stores bile, which we have also talked about it here. Gallbladder storing bile. Pancreas producing digestive enzymes. Okay, so you have got 3 sets of digestive enzymes. Amylase, it will help to further digest your carbohydrates. Okay, protease, as the name suggests, it will help to digest proteins, since the first 3 alphabets are the same. Okay, lipase, it will help to digest lipids. Okay, so what you realized up till here is that there is no fat digestion in the stomach or the mouth. Okay, so which means that the fat digestion begins where? It begins in the small intestines. Okay, so moving on to the next section of your notes. So these are the components that are being used in the alimentary canal. Okay, so let's go through it one by one. Some of it will be repetitive, just take it as a revision. Okay, so the mouth, it contains saliva, which will digest starch to maltose. It rolls it into a bolus. Okay, esophagus itself is peristalsis. Now, the esophagus is unique on its own in the sense that the esophagus do not secrete any enzymes. Okay, but is there digestion going on in the esophagus? Yes, there is. So why is that so? Is because we have got salivary amylase that is still coating the food substances that were previously chewed in the mouth. Okay, so which means the salivary amylase will continue to react throughout the esophagus. Okay, so we cannot say that there is no digestion in the esophagus. There is, simply due to the fact that it was swallowed. Okay, however, take note that there is no chemical production of enzymes at all. Okay, so in the stomach itself, a new thing, hydrochloric acid, it helps to kill the bacteria in the food. Okay, the first front part of the small intestines and the lower part of the small intestines. Okay, so bile secreted by the liver. Pancreatic juice contains these 3 that we spoke about earlier on. Intestinal juice, on the other hand, will further break it down. So what do I mean by this? We have got amylase that breaks starch down to maltose. Protein is broken down to polypeptides. Okay, and fats are broken down to fatty acids and glycerol. Okay, however, maltose have not been broken down into its simplest form yet. Maltose, it is still in the form of a disaccharide. Okay, so which means it has to be broken down into a monosaccharide. Same thing to do with polypeptide. It is still not the simplest form. Okay, so what comes into play are the enzymes in the intestines themselves. So we have got maltose that is left behind, that is broken down by maltase to the simplest form, which is glucose. Okay, polypeptides will be further broken down to amino acids. Okay, and the enzyme to break down my fats will still be lipase itself. Now the ileum, which is the lower part of the small intestine, is responsible for absorption. Okay, so far we have looked at ingestion. Okay, so ingestion is to eat, which takes place in the mouth. Okay, and we have also looked at digestion that takes place by various enzymes themselves. All right, so next we have got absorption, which means the food substances that are being absorbed after eating and being broken down. So once these digested food nutrients, they will have to enter cells, correct? Okay, so when they enter cells to be used, that is what we call assimilation. Okay, so of course food substances that are unused and not required, they will then be egested. Okay, so egested is removal by the anus after it is being stored by the rectum. Okay, so it is stored at rectum first before it is egested. Okay, so you have ingested here and you have got egested here. So what about liquid substances? What about the water or the juice that you take? Okay, those will be excreted. Okay, so take note, excreted is by the excretion of only liquid substances. Okay, and this takes place via a system that we briefly saw earlier on. It's called the excretory system when we did the organization of the organ systems themselves.